I'm so excited to talk to you. Can I just start off by saying, and I mean this with all respect, you
Yeah.
are such a badass. I just love
Why?
everything about you because you've been through some crazy things.
Yes,
You just like, you
yes.
you know who you are. And I'm not kidding. Like, I was thinking about this morning after I listened to one of your podcasts, and I was like, I need to make her my emergency contact.
When you want to kill someone,
I feel
call
like
Iman.
no matter what the situation is, like, I think you would be like, I got you. Even if it was just like advice.
Listen, I welcome it's actually why I have a Patreon. It's just people don't have
Yeah.
faith in people anymore. We've lost all. I mean, look at the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard to have faith right now.
It really,
And but I have people, especially the ones in my Patreon, there's trust there, and I a lot of it is personal.
yeah.
Honestly, a
Yeah.
lot of it is just, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah. I think
So,
everyone is kind of in that place. Even the people who are just like, there are some people who have seen this coming for like decades. You know what
I
I mean?
know, I
And,
know.
but even then, like, no one has gone through this before. And it's just, yeah, we just have to kind of embrace that like weirdness, the awkwardness, we have to
Well, you're in the
be
States.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
God love you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
listen, we're no better
I
here.
agree.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we don't have our election isn't until a year,
Yeah.
if China lets us. But you guys are like you're right around the corner.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
there are elections this year going on everywhere.
Is
It's
there?
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Canada is just like, I don't know. I didn't realize what was going on over there politically and
It's
just,
bad.
yeah, it's
It's
weird.
bad.
I
He's
feel
a
like,
communist. He's a
yeah,
full-blown communist.
yeah. I just, how
Yeah.
it's been kept like they talk about it here, but not really. I just don't think people
We're
realize.
not relevant. Canada's never really been that relevant.
We just don't think enough about a lot of other countries. It's crazy.
Well, if your country, I mean, listen, I'm a person who grew up in the desert, and I've always looked up to the States, but
No.
I understand that your founding fathers, the people who made America what it was, were extremely awake. They were
Yes.
extremely conscious human beings.
I
So
mean,
America started leading the
our
world.
Constitution and our amendments, like it's literally set up for like moments like this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And you are protected here. He literally tore up the Constitution,
Mm.
and we don't even have one right now. He violated everything. Everything.
Wow.
There's no freedom of speech. We
Mm.
have to cover our face. I call them the woke Taliban. Whenever we go in a hospital or any healthcare setting,
Oh, wow.
COVID itself was incredible to me,
Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
face.
Yeah. Can we actually, this is a good segue. Everything you're talking about, I want to
Yeah.
talk about, but even just so people, I want them to hear some of your story because this will put exactly what we're talking about into perspective for them.
So whatever you want, I mean, it's up to you. Where is this going to go? Is it going to go on YouTube?
YouTube, yeah. But
Okay,
honest, I'm
so
not kidding. If you look at anything I've posted, it's
yes, I did.
like I'm not worried about it. Like truly,
All
like
right.
just
Fine. Fine, let's do it. Go for it.
yeah. I definitely take us back all the way to even because you're from England and even just like you giving a little bit about like your parents and
Yeah.
like what was expected of you in terms of like going to school, like just all of it. Like,
Sure.
yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a mutt. I was my father is we have a complicated like family background.
Okay.
So anywhere from Iraq to Syria to Egypt to Turkey to China and Russia, it's all in my blood.
Wow.
So essentially, during the era of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, my father was dispelled due to the political activism of his family.
Mm.
My uncle was hung by Saddam Hussein. He was in his 20s because he was a political activist against the regime. So my father ended up going, sort of becoming displaced. He went to Egypt, studied medicine there, where he met my mother. My mother is Egyptian. So I'm half Egyptian, technically half Iraqi. But my father ended up nationalizing, becoming a Saudi citizen, because at that point, Saudi Arabia had just begun the history of itself. And they were giving out citizenship to people who would come to do a pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage. And my great grandfather was Muslim. So he went there, did the pilgrimage, and they're like, here you go, here's your Saudi citizenship. So I am half Saudi, though I don't really feel that I am, and half Egyptian. Now, they ended up, my father married my mother, and then they moved to, he was doing his fellowship in England, in London specifically. So I was born there. I was born in London. My earlier years that I can recall were in England, and those were sort of the best years of my life.
Mm.
I experienced freedom. English was my first learned language because my nanny was British. I remember going to Harrods. I remember going to Selfridge. I remember my childhood in England. And then there's like a blackout. When
Mm.
I turned 9, my father finished his training. And where does he go? He goes to Saudi Arabia and moves us all to Saudi Arabia. But not just Saudi Arabia, we go to Riyadh. Now, Saudi Arabia has undergone a lot of change, especially in the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the better, but it's nowhere near where it should be. They're still quite lagging behind with human rights, with civility, with women's rights, equality, all of that, although there is an improvement. This is for the people who are going to say, what the hell is she talking about? She's lying. Saudi Arabia is not like this. I was there for 2 years. I worked for 2 years, and Saudi Arabia is not like this. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia 20 plus years ago. So it was sort of the central hub for Wahhabi radical Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood. Those were the teachings that I grew up under. I went to a madrasa. I don't know if you know what a madrasa means, but essentially it's an Islamic indoctrination school. Where I was indoctrinated with extremely radical ideology, hatred of Jews, hatred, anything Jewish. The state of Israel, I was indoctrinated to hate.
Wow.
They are not human. We would call them pigs. They were always animalistic in nature. And the only thing I can say, because people are like, so how did you not? Like, why? People think I'm lying because the indoctrination is so severe.
Yeah.
It's pounded into you, and you're young, you don't think
Yeah.
anything. Oh, okay, this is what I need to believe.
Right. And
But
honestly, that's when people question that, it's interesting because everyone is indoctrinated in some
yes,
way, shape, or form.
yes,
Even if it's just from the family and the upbringing that they have. I mean, like that is forming your thoughts,
conditioning.
and who you
Yes.
are. It's the conditioning. Yes, we all know those are the most formative years. Like yeah. And it doesn't matter whether it's in school or over this topic versus this topic. I mean, it's happening in another way
Everywhere.
to everyone all the time.
But we're not aware of it. That's
Yes.
the
Yes.
problem.
Yes. As a child, we are completely unaware. That is our
So,
environment. We have nothing else to compare it to.
no,
It is what we
no,
know. It is our truth. Yeah, that makes
absolutely.
so much sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And especially if it was so in your face the way it was, especially in your school, like that's
Yeah.
literally where you go to be taught. And if it's,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, wow.
The thing about freedoms, including freedom of thought, freedom to feel what you want to feel. You
Mm,
can't go to school and be taught to hate a specific
mm,
group of people. It's beyond unhuman. I don't even have the words
yeah,
to describe it.
yeah, it's
Uh,
really, yeah.
it's repulsive, but it's happening again right now, especially in the States with a specific group of people politically.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm shocked. Like it really shocked me. But for just me, why did I not fall? I mean, don't get me wrong. I grew up and I got indoctrinated with other things
Mhm.
because I wasn't very aware. But hatred was my red flag. I
Mm.
always saw the energy of hate. I always felt it. I would feel it from the TV, the
Mhm.
religious authorities. I would
Mhm.
feel it from my teachers. I would feel it from my father. I would feel it from my stepmother. I would feel it from my mother. I'd feel it from society. The energy of hatred is what always rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's the only reason I was never indoctrinated to hate Jews. The more I learned to hate Jews, the more I wanted to hook up with a Jewish guy. The more I wanted to go to Israel.
makes sense. Yeah.
So the more they pushed it on me, the more I went the
Yeah.
opposite way,
Okay. Yeah.
which is why they call us black sheep, right?
Of
There's
course.
something off energetically, but you're young, you're not aware, you don't know what it is. All
Yes.
I know is the energy of hatred was I could almost see it. And
Mm.
I would recognize it immediately from a very young age, and I would not like it, and I would not follow it, and I would not listen to it. It would repel me.
And were you consciously like aware of this? Like,
No,
no. Okay.
I was not. I just knew that anyone pushing hate on me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't, it's not in me to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, part of being, I don't use the term starseed or whatever, but it's
Called
part
with.
of our
Yeah.
blueprint. It's
Yeah.
in us.
Yeah.
And that's why we stand out a little bit,
Mhm.
so I just, and then the forcing of me to do things in society. Women had zero
Mm.
freedom. Now people ask me, I ended up going to medical school, but that's after my mother beat the living life out of me because I chose to go into dentistry instead. She's
Mm.
like, you go change the application now. I was severely abused growing up in every aspect you can imagine. I don't really want to get into it,
Mhm.
but there was a lot of abuse and there was a lot of trauma,
Mm.
both within my family and within society as
Mm.
well. I lived in a surveillance state. Within my house, my father would surveil me. I had no autonomy, no freedom of movement. So I really couldn't do much of anything. The only thing I could do, and I did do, is that because I was born in England, when I was 16, my father surprisingly applied for my British passport, and I got it. And I would go to the diplomatic corridor, which no one was allowed in unless you're an international person. And I would use my British passport to go in and I would drink and I would have sex. Everything was there. In Saudi Arabia, there was pork, there was
Wow.
alcohol, there were gorgeous white men with blue eyes, there was music. I had a lot of fun
Didn't know each other.
in that area. So yeah, so that was my little outlet. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, it I ended up going into medicine, becoming a doctor. I graduated med school in Saudi Arabia, and I knew that was my ticket out
Hmm.
because there was no training for the specialty of anesthesia, which is what I was specializing in. So I'm like, do I go to the States? Do I go to Canada? Do I go to the States?
Hmm.
Do I go to Canada? The States had 3 medical exams that I had to sit. Canada had one.
No, yeah. Yeah.
So I sat that, I passed it, and I came here. Never looked back since.
Wow.
Now
Wow.
there's a lot of things I skipped.
Yes.
there were there were major traumatic events in my
Yeah,
life.
I don't want to like traumatize you by
No,
any,
I'm fine.
so like feel free to just say no to anything or like you can give vague answers or
Sure.
whatever. But something that I think is really interesting about your story is that we hear about some of the things that you've gone through all the time. We hear it on the news, all of that. We were saying this before.
Yes.
And um it's just so I've been to a number of places outside of the US. I've seen a lot of the things that you're talking about. And um to see it is it's
Surreal.
an experience in itself. Hearing it come from you, it just I'm still like processing everything I've heard from you.
Yes.
Um, I mean, some of the things like I mean, even in Canada, you've experienced like
Yes.
I feel like we know some of these things happen in certain countries, but like I guarantee there's parts of your story that like I think would just shock people. I mean, even like when you spoke about the kidnapping,
Yes.
he was the last one you, yeah, the last
Yeah.
time. That like
It's
it,
something, isn't it?
yeah. Talk as much or as little of that as you'd like to, but I feel like people need to hear that.
Sure. Now, I have to say something. There is a card in tarot that's
Mm,
called the World.
mm,
Um, People don't understand what that card means. The world, which is essentially the universe, when you pull it, it signifies something spiritual. And what that signifies is in Sufi tarot, I'm studying Sufism, by the way. In Sufi tarot, the card of the world in tarot is represented by a beautiful woman sitting on a swing, and the entire world is underneath her. Valleys, mountains, rivers, seas, and she's on top of it and she's just swinging because she's been able to overcome everything from the valleys to the mountains, to the seas, to the trials and the tribulations that she went through in her life that led her to go within and awaken to inner peace and
mhm,
dominate this
mhm.
world that we live in. I no longer get trauma. I used to. I used to talk about it. I would weep. Reading my story, my blog, the kidnapping, I called it Violated in my blog. It's like a 7 post
Mm,
thing. I would cry. But
mhm.
now I read it and I'm like, okay, well, that happened.
You still
Because
transmuted it. This is why I say you're a badass.
you, anyhow, but that's the major difference between waking up spiritually. Being
Yes,
spiritual is not about religion. It's not about being a chosen one. It's none of this. It's understanding that everything you've come here to experience this world, the good and the bad.
yes, yes.
You can't just choose the good. We
Right.
can't, you know.
Wouldn't be
And
the good without the bad. We say that
exactly.
all the time, and it's so true.
And one of the interesting things about my kidnapping, sorry, I'm giving a long intro into my
Oh, please.
kidnapping, but as I was stepping into the vehicle that I was kidnapped from, I remember a very strong voice that
Mm,
came from within me, not from up here, from within here,
mm,
that told me, you don't want to get into that car because something bad is going to happen. And I remember stepping back and asking the individual, who was a guy, he's a male doctor who worked with me. And I asked him, I don't think we should do this because the religious police, I worked outside of the city in a hospital. And what happened in that scenario is I had a really bad stepmother. My mother had left
mm,
the country, us, everything. She abandoned us and went back to Egypt. And I was left with a horrific stepmother. She
mm,
wouldn't send, and women weren't allowed to drive. She wouldn't send the car to me. And I was post shift. I'd been in a hospital for 24 hours. I wanted to get home. So I was standing there for like, I don't know, 3 hours or something. And the male guy, it was a one woman and one male on call. My male colleague, who was my friend, he's like, he saw me, he's like, listen, I'll drop you home. But it
mm,
was about a good hour outside of the city. And there were a lot of mosques, radical mosques, that I knew were in that area. And we would have to drive by them. There's no way, you have to. And I knew that we would be seen, and I
mm,
knew that we would be followed, and I knew that something bad would happen. My intuition came through.
mm,
So I asked him, and he said, no, don't worry about it. Just sit next to me. They'll think you're my wife. Everything will be fine. So I did. I got in the car. I sat next to him, didn't cover my face. I was wearing my doctor's lab coat. And within 15 minutes, we passed by a mosque. And right in front of that mosque was a religious radical man. He looked at us, and my heart sunk.
mm,
And I just, it's funny. You know, when you just know,
mhm,
you know you're doomed. I don't know, 5 minutes later, we were on a highway. We were surrounded by 4 GMC vehicles. They would drive GMCs. They were known as the Authority of Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice. مطاوعة, we would call them الهيئة. They
wow.
surrounded us. Each vehicle had like 4 big men. We almost died on the highway. Because they boxed us in and they started to hit their brakes
Wow.
in front of us. So he had to stop. Soon as he stopped, they ran out of their cars, opened our doors. Of course, there was no automatic lock back then or anything. Yeah, and got him out, started extensively, violently questioning us about our relationship to each other. They wanted us to present paperwork that we were related in one way or the other, which we did not have because we were not related. So they
Mhm.
beat him up in front of me, put him in a GMC, drove off. They never touched me. I have to be honest. They never touched me. They called me everything under the sun, but they
Wow.
never touched me. They ordered me because I'm filthy. Women are filth, right?
Wow.
So they ordered me. I was kidnapped. They put me in a vehicle. They locked their vehicles would lock. Like once you're in, you can't open it again
Mm.
because I was actually contemplating just, and I couldn't put the window down, just throwing myself out and killing myself at that point.
Wow.
Uh, so that was the kidnapping itself. And they went through my bag. They started calling me awful names in the car. You're a whore, you're a slut. Of course, you're a doctor. And then I ended up, I don't even know how long we drove for, maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And they took me to their house, a house.
What?
It was all men, of course. And I stayed in a room. They put me in a room that had like a prison thing on the windows, no bathroom, no food. I stayed there for 3 days. And they would randomly open the door and come in. And if my face was uncovered, they'd yell at me to cover my face. And they'd walk out. Uh, and then I don't even know what happened. I don't even think I needed to use the washroom, to be honest with you. I do remember that I became extremely hypoglycemic, like my blood sugars really went down. And I was like just exhausted. I was drowsy. Half the time I didn't understand what was being said to me. And then finally, a whole bunch of them, 12 men, came in a room with a desk for an elder man, and they put the desk in front of me, and I was sitting on the floor. And he put his feet on the desk right in front of my face. And he ordered me to double the cover of my face because he could see my eyes. This was after 3 days of being there. And they said, you sign these 4 papers and you're good. You don't sign them, you'll never see the outside world again. So they gave me for 4 empty blank pieces of paper, and they made me put my thumbprint on them. So
Oh
that,
my gosh.
yeah. And I did because I wanted out. I didn't care. I couldn't even think at that point. Like
Yeah.
I was like, I guess this is torture. I don't even know what this would be. But yeah, I did that. And, and then they I think I got some food. Um, and then
At the house or outside of it?
no, inside. They gave me some bread.
Were you the only one there?
Yes. Well, there were men.
Right, but there was no one, they didn't have anyone else.
No, no, no,
Okay. And,
no.
and is that a typical like are there stories like
Yes.
okay, so
Yes.
you know,
These are
is
thugs.
there anything normal about that where like if these kind of men, what do you guys call them? What's the
Religious police. Yeah. Well,
so
yeah.
like is that like is there like almost like a norm that like that can be expected like that's where you're gonna end up, or are they supposed to be taking you guys to jail when something like that happens? Is
I don't
like
think there was a norm. They had the authority to even kill you. They did do that to a few people
wow,
before me, after me. They would, if you confronted them, especially men, if they got into an altercation with them, they would kill them.
they have
Uh,
the authority to
they
do that.
do. They
So
do.
that puts a lot into perspective when I mean honestly, even even if like I knew I was going somewhere not so bad, I would truly consider I would do everything I could to jump out of the car, like you were saying.
Yes, I did. I tried.
And knowing now what you knew about these people and what they could do, like that makes complete sense. When
Yeah.
you were there, were you almost in a state of like shock and like
Yes, I
numbness?
detached
Okay.
completely,
Okay.
completely detached. I couldn't even cry.
Wow.
It was surreal. It was almost like I was outside of my body for most
Yeah.
of this experience. You
Yeah.
go numb. I
Yeah.
guess I don't know if I'm not saying that but women who get raped go
Yeah.
through this.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
you're extremely violated at a personal level, you go through this. You just become you can't. Like you just stop,
I
you
have
know?
never put these two things together, but now that you're bringing it up, like when you hear about NDE experiences, so
Yeah.
many of them have an out of body or have an experience where they are looking down at everything,
Yes.
not in the pain, they're not feeling it.
Yes.
Now that you're saying what you're saying and hearing, like just thinking about stories that I've heard of other women in like abusive situations or some whatever it is, they're actually describing the same thing.
Yes. Yes. Near-death experience is not just physical body trauma.
Wow.
You can, yeah, your soul leaves you, well, parts of your soul leave you when they fracture off of you to protect themselves when
Yeah.
you're traumatized. The biggest hit is when your physical body can no longer hold your soul,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But a big part of me left that day, during that time period. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
But
Sorry.
yes.
I'm having like an aha moment right now as we.
No, write it down, whatever, please. Go
Oh,
ahead. It's good.
um, this is incredible. How did you give the fingerprint, then like how many of them are escorting you out? Like where how did that like wrap up? Did they just drop you somewhere?
Well, I remember after I gave my fingerprint, the elder is supposed to be the compassionate one, the one who put his feet in my face. He's
Mm,
supposed to be the wise one, the one they look up to, who's very, nice and religious man. One of them started running at me to punch me, started calling me a whore. Uh, and throughout this experience, they kept calling me doctora, doctora, huh? Like, to put
mm,
women who are physicians in my part of the world, there were very limited options for education. And people don't believe that medicine is allowed, women are allowed to go into medicine. We are, very little number of us go into medicine because of the way we're viewed,
mm,
because of the way we're treated.
mm.
So to them, I'm a whore, just by the simple fact that I'm a doctor.
Wow.
So one of them ran at me to punch me, to hit me, and I guess a few of them grabbed him. Like he really came close to me, and they grabbed him, and oh no, no, go outside, and then they just told me, they escorted me, never touching me, escorted me out into the back of a GMC this time, like where you put the goats and the sheep, in the back of a truck, and I fell asleep.
Mm,
And I think it was maybe late afternoon when that happened. And then I woke up, it was evening, and I was in the women's prison.
wow.
Like they were driving, the gates were opening, the big gates were opening. And I do remember having, it was interesting because I noticed something, like my awareness started to kick in at that point. I noticed that one of the people, the men in the vehicle, went out of the vehicle, and the women's prison was run by women, and they were all covered, and he started flirting with her in
Mm,
front of me. And
and
I thought, and here I am in the back of a truck like an animal, going to prison for simply being dropped off home by a man who's not my relative, and here you are flirting with this woman. I'll never forget that. I will never forget that. It imprinted in my mind the level of hypocrisy that I was witnessing.
and do you think that that just goes to show like how they're working together?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's corruption,
Yeah.
right? And that was it. That was the beginning of my imprisonment, which I believe lasted 3 months. I really can't tell you how long. It's like
Yeah.
days merged in with nights.
Wow.
uh,
Wow.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I was in
So,
solitary for 3 months. I would have to. They would escort you out of the room 5 times a day to pray. So prayer was mandatory. They would feed you twice, garbage, rubbish, porridge. I barely ate. Um, and you never were told anything. You didn't know anything. You just were there, you know. And in that women's prison, there were other women with me who were all honor crimes. You know, we were all imprisoned for crimes of honor. Some of them, that prison became their home because they were disowned by their family, because eventually somebody has to come pick you up from prison so that you can get your sentencing. Some of these women, one of them was, I remember, I'll never forget her. She was a young girl, 18, 19. She had a little boy with her. She got pregnant outside of wedlock, and her family disowned her, but she was too young to be killed. So they just threw her away, and she lived there in that prison with her young boy, who never, they wouldn't let us out. We're not allowed to go out. So neither her nor her son ever saw
Oh
this outside, you
gosh.
know. I still think about her. I still think about her little kid. I don't know.
So the
But
reason why, so like it's mandatory that they won't just let you leave the prison. They won't just let
no,
you have
no.
to hand it off to your
Yeah,
family.
yeah. Your father has to, whoever is responsible for you, the man who owns you, essentially, has to come get you. So if it was your brother, it has to be your brother. If it was your father, it has to be your father. If it was your husband, it has to be your husband. And a lot of these girls, because the culture is so narrow-minded and radical, they were disowned. The family would just say, no, we don't want her. So what do they do with them? They leave them there. And eventually, by the way, these girls end up getting married off to one of these men.
That makes total. I was actually
Yeah,
gonna say, do they end up do they
yeah,
use like for sex trafficking or who
yeah.
knows?
Essentially a concubine, you know. Like, well, I mean, they marry her, but they can do whatever they want with her because she's ashamed. She's rotten fruit. She's not honorable. So yeah. So God knows what happens there.
Okay.
I
This happened to the doctor your coworker that you were with too, right?
Yes, he was, yes. He went, I actually, the end result of my story is I was pardoned by the Prince of Riyadh. My brother ended up, in the end, my father came and got me
God.
after a horrible 3 months of
Mm.
not knowing anything, not talking to anyone, not knowing just nothing, you know. Suddenly one day they take me down to a room, sit here, they read some Quran, some men come in, and then another man comes in, and then I'm like, I recognize this man's, voice while he's talking, and I look, because you're supposed to be looking down, you can't be looking up. I looked and it was my father,
Mm.
and they signed some papers, and my father took me home. And
Mm.
then within 2 weeks, I was supposed to go and get 80 lashes, like get whipped in public 80 times. And my father disowned me. He gave my ownership to my brother, and my brother went and tried to fight this. So he went to the Prince of Riyadh. I forget who it was at the time. You can look it up. Whoever that prince was during that time period, which was roughly, I don't know, 2000, early 2000s.
What?
I got pardoned because my brother lied to the prince and told him that I was married, and my husband did not know anything about my story. So they didn't want me to be divorced. So they forgave me. But the man that was with me, the doctor, the male, he ended up getting 80 lashes. He
And
didn't.
okay, so I have to ask, what does that look like when you say it's in public and like, I mean, like literally like in the middle of the road? Is there like a place where
Usually in a mosque,
never
close to a mosque, usually after Friday prayer, because it's a very religious ceremony. Sorry, torturing human beings, apparently.
believable?
It,
And is
what?
it like normal for there to be like more than one? Like, is it like
There's a big gathering. It's like a beheading. I don't know. One of
no?
the first things I saw in Saudi Arabia was a beheading, by the way. I think I was 9 or 10.
I
They
mean,
they usually gather, like the olden days you see in the movies.
yes.
Ah, they gather
Yes. That's why
just like that.
and you're telling me parts that I haven't heard you say before. And like this is exactly why people need to hear this. Like, yes. I mean, again, this was
I
20
know, but
years ago, but that's
capital punishment is still in
wow.
Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so I don't
Yes.
know. Like, and it's horrific because they use a sword. Like, it's just barbaric. It's all, I don't, yeah, it's not good.
And I
So
would
there's a reason I woke up spiritually when I did. I've seen too much.
absolutely, yeah. So you and him were you in your like medical uniform?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Because I was thinking about this when they pulled you out of the car, my mind immediately went to like, oh, I wonder if they were gonna like maybe be nicer to you guys because they see your
No.
doctors. In the US, I feel like, I mean, the, all of that, there's good and bad. Like
Yes.
that's how it is with everything. But I feel like the majority of them would like take it maybe a little easy on like two doctors just getting off work. You know what I mean? Even if they were speeding or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
but in your case, it was
It's
great
worse.
for you
It's
guys to do
worse.
that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably triggered the man who saw us in front of the mosque that I was wearing a lab coat. That
Wow.
probably was a trigger for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
but it is what it is. And like I said, I don't blame myself, but my intuition did kick in and I ignored it. It did kick in.
Wow.
I was warned not to do this. And yeah, I it's one of those times where it's a lesson learned to
Yeah.
follow your intuition. It really is.
And honestly, this is a perfect segue. I couldn't agree more. I try to stress the importance of our intuition all the time. Like I think people still just it's so weird. Like we talk about like listening to your gut and like you're you always have that feeling. You always know. Like we all talk about it, but like when it comes to actually listening to it, like
We ignore it.
either ignore it or like some people like outright like don't think it's real or happening as often as it is or I mean it's always happening, you know.
Yeah.
And like yeah, I can't stress the importance enough of listening to our intuition. um I wanted to segue into COVID because now that you've explained what you've explained, I mean, this is a perfect example of when yeah, you listened to, I feel like a lot of people had an awakening during
Oh,
COVID.
yes.
And I think for you, it's very much like me, where there have just been all these things that have like that in total were like the catalyst to,
Yeah.
but 2020 was like, I feel like it was like the turning point for a lot of people, not necessarily the catalyst, but like the point where they were like, okay, this is like in my face. I've experienced like now it's like so blatantly here. Like I can either do
Yeah.
things differently or I can just continue on the path
Exactly.
he's been on. And um I would
Yeah.
love for you to talk about COVID and why um I mean the masks were heinous for so many reasons, but
Yeah.
your perspective is something I have not thought about, and it makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would love for you to talk about just the awakening that you had during COVID and all of that.
Oh, the masks. By the way, the mask mandates are back in Canada. They do them once. I don't even know anymore, and half the country's wearing it. I've given up. I've stopped. Like the way I used to get triggered by the masks, which was massive in the beginning of COVID, it was an actual literal fear.
Mm,
You have to understand, covering my face. Now, before the incident I told you about, I was in jail twice before for not covering my face.
mm,
Covering my face and being ordered to cover my face, it doesn't matter what the reasoning is, the end of the world,
right.
virus, a gas leak. I don't care.
Yeah.
I want to choose to do this. I don't want to be ordered and to be punished
Yes.
for not doing it. All
Yes.
right. So that was a massive trigger for me, and it was horrible. Horrible. I live in a part of Canada. I live in the East Coast. We don't have, by the way, I don't believe that there are conservatives in this country. I
Mm.
think there's left, and then you have like
Yeah.
light,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of
The
like a
liberal left
light beer
foot
and a beer.
is like, yeah.
Yeah. So I live in the hub of the radical left. That's where I'm at. Like complete sort of Trump derangement syndrome. I don't care where people are at politically with Trump,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I live in Trump derangement syndrome part of Canada,
Mm.
where you say the word, they will have meltdowns. Like you can't even, it's like saying bomb
Yeah.
in an airport. So that's where I live. So the masks were a religion.
Yeah.
And what did I do? I saw the signs. I knew the mask mandates were coming. I immediately went, I had a family doctor at that point. I explained to her exactly what happened to me. She immediately got me a medical exemption from the authorities. Like it took me 2 weeks to get this piece of paper. You remember Papers, Please? Like
Yeah.
Nazi Germany?
Yes.
That's where we were here. I couldn't step out of my apartment without this paper with me, just like it was in Saudi Arabia. You have to have a paper. If you were with a man, you have to have a piece of paper in case you get arrested to show them that you're good. This man's my husband. So I had a piece of paper with me everywhere I went, and it was not honored by anyone, especially the healthcare system. So I ended up having to cover my face regardless of my medical exemption. On top of that, the shaming of society. I would be ganged up on. Now imagine these are people who are afraid of a virus.
Yeah.
And they would come at you. They would surround you and harass you and chase you. I was chased by men to cover my face in Canada. So anyway, it all led to a severe re-trauma. I was re-traumatized, especially of my abduction. It all came back.
Yes.
So I remember like I would go out. I was so afraid to go out. I would open the door and I would start like this. I would start shaking. And I had no one to go to because everything was shut down. So I had to go through that on my own. And at some point, and of course, they started with Islam here. They allowed the call to prayer. Can you imagine?
No.
I traumatized for
No.
20 plus years under radical Islam by the call to prayer. And then suddenly here in Canada, in the little village that I live in, you hear the call to
No.
prayer.
That would be truly surreal.
It was. It
Yeah.
was all
Even
surreal.
just hearing that when just traveling and in the just hearing it, like
Yeah.
that
Being
even is
ordered.
surreal. And that I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
So it culminated in something called a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. When this was happening to me, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was just dying. Like I really just thought it was the end for
Yes.
me.
Yes.
But then other things began to happen with it. I began to get sort of communication from the universe. And it helped me because it took away from the trauma that I was going through. There were other things. I was seeing lights. It
Yeah.
was pretty. I was seeing geometric shapes. I was getting downloads. I was constantly seeing 1111.
Yes.
And then I'm like, okay, well, let me go this way. And what's this about? And what is that? And I just sort of forgot about anyway. So I dove in, I started meditation. The first 2 days of the lockdowns, I continuously, well, with pee breaks, for 48 hours, I meditated.
Oh,
48, I remember it. I will never forget it. 48 hours, I sat down and I went within. And that was it.
could you imagine if all spent the first 48 hours just meditating during
Yeah.
COVID? Could you imagine?
If people did this, we would be in a different spot right now as a collective. If everyone did this.
Literally a completely different spot.
But yeah, so
Beautiful.
it helped. It's 2:22 right now over here. It's funny, I just looked at the time.
That's so funny.
So yeah, that was it. But the mask mandates are, I don't know. I don't know. COVID was needed. I hate it. Don't get me wrong.
I know. I hear you though. I hear you. Yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hate it. I hate everything that came with it.
Yes.
But it was needed
Yes.
because, like you said, a lot of people woke up.
Mm.
It changed the trajectory that we were on, which we were headed for doom, I believe,
I
as a species, you know. Now, the chaos is not resolved yet. It's going to take a
Right.
little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
for that to resolve.
Think about it. The the energy like has to like it has to almost like come to completion. It has to do its thing. Like
Yes.
we've been manifesting and creating forever. And like we have
Yes.
to let it that like that has to, you
Yeah.
know, come down and get out of the way. Like it's gonna take time. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
I
And
absolutely think we're seeing it right before our eyes. It feels weird and almost like we're going backwards and all that. But again, that's what the death, that's what the crumbling looks like. So
yes,
it makes so much sense.
it's funny. I studied Reiki. I took a lot of sort of spirit, like I really diverted my life during COVID.
Yeah, I did this.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure you know, I studied Reiki, and in the Reiki, we were like, I learned that we as a species have come to a halt
Hmm.
and we have to go backwards. And you see it. We've gone backwards quite a bit now, especially with civility, human rights, all that kind of thing, even in the West.
Hmm.
And we're going to do a U-turn
Hmm.
and we're going to come back the right way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting.
Listen,
Sure it
it
is.
has to, because everybody, you know how, I don't know about you, but I walk around and I'm fascinated at the people that think that COVID was normal. I'm absolutely fascinated by them.
Yes.
They
Yes.
think it was fine. What
Yes.
else was, it's fine and it was good.
And like
And
so many people just like compare it to like other like plagues and like it's like
no, 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 no,
no.
no. But everybody wakes up different.
Yeah.
Like the majority of us woke up during COVID.
Yes.
A lot of us woke up before 9/11. If you remember, I don't know if you were there,
Yes.
if you saw it, that
Yeah.
was the spark. And then sort of the kaboom was COVID.
Yes.
And it's going to continue. We're going to have little hits here and there. They might be big, they might be little. Those who awakened have awakened, but the job's not completed yet. There's
Right.
others, you
Yeah.
know?
Absolutely. And what really is like awakened? It's like awakening and like enlightenment. Like I mean, I don't know. I don't know. There's it's levels. Like
It
I mean,
is.
there's like a baseline. And like if like in terms of like what you consider like someone that's awakened, like I guess there's a baseline. They're aware of certain things, but like
Yes.
we're always gonna be every day, literally every day, we are awakening. We are waking up and we are going to be,
It's
learning.
unraveling.
We're going to have a million aha moments over and over.
Yes.
Like it, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess it's unplugging from the hive mind, which
Yes.
a lot of us were plugged
Yes.
into.
Yes.
Um, I now listen, I don't judge. Well, it's hard, but I try not to. Let me rephrase. I try not to judge people who are still really absorbed by the media,
Mhm.
by any of it,
Yeah.
by the divisiveness that we're seeing around the world, the othering. It it's very interesting to watch because I was there.
Yeah.
I was othering people. I didn't like the people who were shoving fit masks on me, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Now I put them on. I don't like
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
it's fine. So it's needed right now. It's what people I don't want to upset people too much. But the there's a show that I've stopped watching TV. That's
Mhm.
the news, TV, all of it I've unplugged from. I'm slowly trickling back, but I'm very selective in what it is I watch.
Mhm.
I
That's
watch a show. It's interesting to watch this show. I don't know if you know it. It's called Love Is Blind. It's on Netflix.
yes.
I
Yes.
watch it because I'm fascinated. I like seeing people's patterns. I
Mhm.
I enjoy it. Like
Yes. I
it's
love to people watch. Yeah.
yeah.
Like in any
So
scenario.
it is. It's like, oh, she's got this going on. He's got that going on. I can see that. I don't get absorbed by it. But this last season of Love Is Blind, they've got a whole bunch of progressives who hate white people
so funny. That doesn't surprise me either.
They hate Republicans, they hate this, they hate that, and they're very righteous.
Mhm.
I'm better than Trump supporters. And I'm like, whoa.
Righteousness in all of us. That when I started to peel that back, I was like,
Yeah,
oh man.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
I'm thinking about myself. Like it, yeah, it's we don't realize the ego is a funny thing. It really
It
the
is.
irony and everything, and like the it's just
You have to be
humans are
aware.
funny, funny people.
It's
They're funny creatures.
it's just, but I guess it's you have to have compassion for
Yeah,
people who are not, who are still in this. They're
yeah,
still playing this.
yes,
They are hurting. They might pretend that they're not.
right.
I
Absolutely.
pretended that I wasn't. I'm
Yeah,
sure you did.
absolutely. Yeah,
But to go and declare your hatred, can you imagine you're projecting this hatred into the universe?
yeah,
Y- like that's a lot of negative energy that
yeah.
you're putting out. You're projecting it on national TV that you hate this person, these people are white, they're idiots.
Yes,
I don't know what. Forget about racism. I'm talking beyond that,
yeah,
even at this point.
absolutely.
This energy you're projecting, you're telling us that you're hurt. You're
Yeah,
projecting a lot of anger and hatred.
yes, yes,
So
yes.
I don't know. I try not to. I really try to project as much as I can passion, compassion, love,
Yeah,
understanding, and I walk away. I've
yeah,
learned to walk away from a lot of things that in the
yeah.
past probably I wouldn't.
You have to set boundaries. It's yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It really is for yourself. Yeah. I totally, totally agree. I lived with my one of my best friends for a while, and I had never watched Love is Blind, and they were obsessed with it. And they were like on the tail end of one of the seasons, and I ended up watching one episode with them, and I literally binged it for, like all of the seasons.
I not to. It's like, oh my God, it's like a train wreck.
For
I
like
can't stop watching.
really. Because I did the same thing during COVID. I totally went I went to YouTube and documentaries and I started reading books like nonstop. But
Yes,
like Netflix and all of that, like it just
took
I
a back seat.
took myself, yeah, it took a backseat. I took myself away from all of it. And yeah, when I saw that one episode, I was like, oh my gosh. It was just also great because it's I love to watch stuff like that every now and then because like just being engulfed with like
Yeah,
related to any subject that you're learning about when you're diving into any of this, it's a lot.
it is.
And sometimes
It
it's just
is.
I need to just sit down and watch Love is Blind and you know,
And laugh.
I'm gonna transport myself to another universe right now and
I guess it's
like
the
nothing was
drama.
happening.
It's the drama which we all were sucked into,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like it's this 3D drama, which
Yes.
for a lot of us now is non-existent. We can
Right.
see it.
Yeah.
Like you don't play in it anymore. You're sort of like, okay, I can see this. I
Yes.
see it. I get it.
Yeah.
Not with judgment. Not
No.
with
I
judgment.
truly believe like the whole system is set up in a way,
Yeah.
in multiple ways to keep us busy and distracted and
Yeah.
like the whole reality like phase, like that when that came up, that didn't surprise me at all. Not one bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't, yeah, like I have so much grace for all of us. One, I've been there. There are in plenty of ways I still am there. And we
Yes.
truly did not only did we not know, I mean, it was designed for us to not know. I mean, even our remembering of where we come from,
Yes.
we lose that memory. And
Yes.
when we're here, we're just like, immediately we're just
Consumed.
brainwashed over and over again. So, like, yeah, it makes total sense that like we're hypocritical and like, you know what I mean? Like, it just, yeah, it makes so much sense. But we
Yep.
are starting to see it all, at least. At least we're like to a point where like we're aware of the ego. You know what I mean?
You got to keep it in check. I
It's
find
hurting. Yeah.
ego, I've seen ego in spiritual communities.
Yeah,
It's
for sure. I mean,
Yeah,
everywhere. I mean, and it's in us for a reason. It should be there, but like, yeah, it's
it's fascinating.
again, the fact that we're even talking about, like, now it's almost like cliche to use that word. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. And the fact that we're even talking about ego the way that we are these days, talking about anything the way that we are these days says everything. And it's awesome. I'll have you close this out however you want. Any final words, any advice, any whatever.
Honestly, I don't know, maybe more love, more compassion. Whoever is watching this, less judgment, less self-judgment, less judgment of others, more understanding, more compassion, more sympathy, more empathy. That is what we need in this world. What we do not need is more othering, more divisiveness, more righteousness. That
Yes.
is that is my message. That is all I have to say. Am I free 100% of all these things? No, but I keep them in check.
Yes.
And I know when I'm judging someone, and I immediately work on myself, because when you judge another, you're judging something inside of you. So that's it. Thank
Mm.
you so much. I really, truly enjoyed this. Really, I did. And
Everything about you is just incredible. I love it. And for those of you that are listening, she does everything at this point. She's a one-stop shop, and I will have, like, again, I'll have your bio and all that in the description and your links. And yeah, I thank you
thank
so
you.
much. This was awesome.
You are most welcome. I welcome this opportunity anytime, my dear.